It's going to do it. There it is. Bam.
This is Mitch Ferguson, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
Yeah, earlier yesterday, I posted on X about how, if you're trying to create and make money on that app, it's just not the place to reliably do that. You can do that. You can build a business there. A lot of people do. But what's more important to me is I get to know you and we get to talk about things. And now we're even venturing into the professional world where you may or may not. We have projects we're discussing on what's next. It's incredible to be able to do this. And by the way, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Happy New Year, Pete. It's I don't know if we talked about this before. My wife is Colombian, and that makes my life full of wonderful and blessed surprises all year long, but especially in New Year's, because Colombians for New Year's have a whole list of things that must be done at the stroke of midnight, starting with 12 grapes and a wish for each month, a bucket full of water where you toss the water out the door, money in your shoe, run around the block with a suitcase. And each of these things has a corresponding bit of karma that it's going to sprinkle throughout your new year.
I love it.
It must all be done. You can't laugh, and you've got to get them done in a reasonable amount of time. So as soon as we're done with this, I'm going to go and make my list, because you got to sequence that sort of thing, right? So anyway, yes, Happy New Year to you as well.
Happy New Year. Yeah, thanks for joining me. So I guess what everybody who doesn't know, Mitch is a retired economist, and economists are great because you guys look at a problem. Like if the problem is homelessness and someone's like, let's just spend $60 billion, that'll solve the problem. You then need to walk in and say, hold on a second.
Yeah, for sure. It's the problem of homelessness. If you're a good economist or if you're a good sociologist, you realize it's not just a problem of a person who does or does not have a house. There's a whole bunch of problems, and hopefully the money that you have available to throw at the problem can get at the most important of those problems that are presenting. That's tricky though.
It is tricky. Well, and have you, this is the thing I learned from watching us struggle to nation build or state build is, have you defined the problem? And are you working towards a thing that pushes do the tactical day-to-day skills that have to be professional? Do they match up and feed the statistical monster, the strategic monster that demands, I need 150 of these individual tactical lacks per hour all throughout the country, the state, the county, whatever it is, to one little tick, right? And by the way, sometimes the clock ticks backwards. And so when I think about these things, it's not just the economists, it's the political scientists, but it's also the practitioners. I was talking to the lady who played Nellie Olson, has become a bit of a friend through the show. Her name is Allison. And during the full bloom of the AIDS crisis, the federal government, they're precious. They're like, hey, listen, guys, stop having unprotected sex. She's like, I'm in West Hollywood. That's not even possible here, right? And so she had to work where the work was. And because someone like Allison has no voice with someone federally, these things the tether is snapped. And so you need multiple tethers, Pete would say. You would need the economist saying, hey, this makes sense with the economist on the ground, and this is working, this is not, so that you could attune that string so that it plays in the right note. Because if you don't do that, you don't play any music at all.
Yeah, beautifully said. And in my experience on the federal side of things, and especially overseas, what we found was having identified a problem is important. The components of the problem, vitally important. The metrics used to evaluate how we interact with those problems, really important for the political machine back in Washington. And if it's really hard to count success, although it may be the most important economic or political thing, the folks that run these programs don't want to do it. We can't have negative outcomes. What do you mean negative outcome? You're going to save so many. Yeah, but the per dollar burn rate is it's not worth that juice. That's not worth the squeeze. So that was, I think, hard for me to understand.
Going back to homelessness, when the sociology person, the caseworker, the boss caseworker is like, hey, listen, we can defeat we can defeat addiction at a rate of about 97% failure.
Well, sign up now. Have I got a deal for you? Change the world. But you'd change the world for that 3% of people, and you do it very
That's how you have to work it. That's how you do it, right? Person by person. And there's failure within that failure. I had a guy on the show a while back, and he worked in that kind of world in New York City. And he's like, yeah, we have a 80% plus rate of getting people off the street within 3 months. And I'm like, what's the longitudinal number? Because I know how these numbers work. Like, oh no, we don't study that. No. 3 months, and that's our job. 3 months. And so you just get this rototiller, and you just constantly rototill, never plant any crops.
No, and you're actually happy to see those cats come back. Like, oh yeah, this is great. There's throughput, justifies my burn rate. My administrative chunk gets paid the same, doesn't matter. That sort of thing would frustrate me to no end. And it's probably why I'm a retired economist as opposed to an active economist, because at some point later in my life, I started complaining pretty loudly about what a crock this was. It's actually quite interesting if you continue that thinking out into the political realm. And, if you don't want to talk about this, press the pause button, that's fine. But what makes Trump land so very interesting is there's no big money behind it after Trump. So, for example, when we did free trade agreements through both Republican and Democratic administrations, sure as shooting, the people in our corner were the U.S. Chamber. And they were there backing hard campaigns for the House of Representatives, for the senators, for the administrations that wanted to get these free trade agreements done, because it benefited their membership in a tangible way they could count, and so on and so forth. So then you have a disruptor come in and say, wow, okay, we're going to renegotiate all these things. We're going to terminate them. We're going to put tariffs on. Where's the money behind that position? Who's going to make out so well generally that there's enough financial oomph behind that movement to keep it going past the president who really wants it to happen? I don't think it's there. I think it's going to all revert back to the way it was, because the money and the inertia are from the U.S. Chamber and from others is going to just overwhelm any other political voice.
Oh, you just said a lot. I mean, these things are big behemoths. They're leviathans. And you can say the deep state and get all crazy about it, but it's just going to keep swimming. And so you can hit it with an axe and everything else, but that machine doesn't want to change. And even if you do manage some kind of change, 2 years later, the chains get on that change and everything reverts back to where it was, because that's
3 years is nothing. Works. 3 years is nothing now at this point. And the machine can be dangerous. The machine can be ruthless. The machine doesn't really care about you. Right. So it's interesting. We'll have to see what happens. That's why I think in some of the conversations you've had with different folks over the past couple of weeks, where you look at secretaries of state, which is kind of where I came from, and deciding whether or not they were effective or not effective. Well, a lot of times they were just doing what they were told by the various power centers. And Marco Rubio, for example, perhaps isn't doing that to the extent, at least that I didn't think he'd do it to the extent that he's doing it. I mean, he was on Senate Finance or Senate Intelligence Committee, right? He was, that's a big deal, and he knows what's going on. And yet here he comes being a very effective Secretary of State for President Trump, which is awesome. Right. What happens after that? I was trying to think the last Secretary of State that was maybe like that. And you have to go all the way back to Schultz. All the way back to Schultz and Reagan for someone that could take the horns of the bureaucracy and steer it the way either they or the president, or hopefully both, wanted it to be steered.
So this is great. And I love these. You and I both have lived abroad and watched how us works, right? Someone will say, well, you lived in Ecuador, nothing like, Portugal, but we are the same everywhere we go. So
for good or bad. Yeah.
We went to Afghanistan. Exactly. And if you know the playbook, there's 200 of you, that are running the playbook, and you're doing whatever. And even though you might do different things every day, it's the same playbook. So when we went to Afghanistan, we're trying to deal with the Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of this, Ministry of that. And if you went down to the state level, I'm saying the word state so people can recognize, like California, Utah, they have states, they call them districts or provinces. Provinces and then districts. Districts are like a county. Okay, so you get onto the county level, and there'd be no one dealing with Ministry of Mines. No partner. So whoever that person was never improving their position, had no advice, had no access to money. And this is in a country made out of mountains. And then you go to the state level, and I'm saying that, like, the provincial level, everybody, same thing. We don't partner with that person. So imagine you're trying to build this machine and nobody's partnering with, and I'm saying Ministry of Mines. There's a lot of ministries that we just didn't care about because it was hard enough. It was already impossible to do interior, defense, all these other ones that were out there. And so fraught with errors, fraught with mistakes, very expensive, and nobody wants to get briefed that every day, right? And so that's the challenge of all of these big moving projects. even like they would have a provincial council, which is like a House of Representatives, everybody for a state level. And these guys were all tribal elders. They were hugely influential. And there's a lot of these non-traditional systems within the world. It's actually probably the norm around the world, where you go to your uncle to solve a problem. We wouldn't partner with those guys reliably. And they were the most important influential people in the Valley. And if you knew all of them, I'm saying the Valley, province, district, whatever it was, if you knew them and if you were partnered with them in a way that made sense, you could maybe somewhat reliably nudge the ball forward. And so someone like Rubio comes in, I'm not against him, I'm not against anybody. But when he comes in and starts changing things, he only gets to change so much because the machine does have demands of his time and things he has to do that have nothing to do with where he wants to go. But also he's going to have an error rate that's pretty high because it's just very hard to get these things right.
The tribal elders thing, I think you're spot on. The way you described it in a place I'm not familiar with. I didn't go to the Middle East or places like that. I was in Africa and Latin America, but you had the same sort of thing. And the way you'd find out if you did something wrong with regard to those cats is the train wouldn't come. You're waiting for the train at the station. Where's the train? And you call your guys like, how come the train's, and then eventually you find out that it's, because those guys stopped it or whatever. One of the worst things, it's not the worst, it's actually my favorite thing, but it's really hard because your people, like you said, don't want to be briefed on it. You get assigned a project. Hey, Pete, hey, Mitch, you're in charge of X. And here's how much work we've done on X, right? 0. So you stare, you're like, all right, boss. And so you stare at that piece of paper and there's no prevention, there's no state director of mines, but because you went to the parties, that there are some students who went to a university in that other town down the way that studied geology. And so you bring them up to the embassy for a tea or a coffee or something non-threatening, and you say, hey, how come you guys, and maybe you bring the sub-minister of mines. Did you ever meet these guys? Did you ever hear, how did you get to your position? You start planting the seeds, and eventually that's but then what happens? You were gone after 2 or 3 years. And then the next person comes in and it's like, where's the Rolodex? I don't know.
Yeah. Or the person above you comes in and they're like, we don't care about mines around here. And you're like, well, we're on the edge of doing something big and it's free. It's free, man. Yeah, we don't do mines around here.
I had a whole, I started with this and then I had a whole, it was all set up and it was awesome. And I turned it into my economic counselor and he read it and it was maybe 3 pages. And this is exactly what he said. Yeah, Mitch, I'm not feeling it. And that was it. Right. And
it's true.
And that was cool. I mean, that's fine. I'll go work on something else. But sometimes that happens. And I'm not saying that's the best management technique, but that's what happens.
It is, and they're there to manage whatever, and no one really gets evaluated on the calls they didn't make, that should have made, all these kind of things. There's a guy I know he's a Marine, retired, has a patch on one eye. He's just a hard ass, but he's brilliant. He grew up in South America. His dad worked in the mining industry, speaking of mines, and he was on trains. So he speaks Quechua fluently, speaks Spanish fluently, and so as he graduated up the ranks in the Marines, he started becoming a liaison with the Latin American and Southern American partners, and he largely had the Cuban problem primarily solved during the Clinton administration. It was right during the Elian Gonzalez. Is that what that kid's name was?
Yeah, for sure.
That had taken a bite out of the capacity that the president wanted to spend on Cuba. And so when he came up with this paper full of things to get this all figured out, and I think if you sit down, I think we can solve this and have positive relations with Cuba. I'm not feeling that. Sorry, Colonel. Killed.
Killed. I don't even remember what the topic was, but I remember it being killed. Because we move on. It's like the next best thing. A couple different times in my career it happened. But sometimes I've done it. I started with this, and I did all that. And the ambassador would look at me and she says, 3 zips up and Z formation. That's how you do it. She was a really cool ambassador. And so we went and we got the Congress on board. She called the president, all this stuff, all those things good ambassadors can do. And in a year and a half, people are flying down to the country, signing things, big things happen. So I think for every success like that, there are probably 5 I'm not feeling it. And maybe, in my career, there were probably 10 overall, right? So that's 20 years in a nutshell.
And maybe 10% or 20% of those I'm not feeling it are the right call. There's that all. It's just all.
I never thought of that. That's quite possible. course
Well,
it has
because you know
value.
how it is, like you make this whole thing, and all of a sudden you found out. I always like to like ask like the agents that I work with if they're coming up. You know, it's a good thing to think about who's running who, and you got to be a little bit being run by the other person. And so all of a sudden you
That's a good
find
point.
out, oh, damn it, he's got me. You know, it's like wrestling, and you're like, oh.
Uncle.
Yeah, I didn't know I was losing until I lost.
What's
Oh,
that line you guys, I don't you guys,
yeah.
the intelligence community uses a lot? This is probably meant to influence more than inform, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
sometimes, especially in the State Department role, you'd get these guys come in influencing all day long, never informing really. You know, if
Mhm.
who
Yeah,
knows what they were doing. But yeah, you had to watch out for that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. So
Hmm.
let's transition that into talking about this in a business sense, and we'll use it because we talk a lot about the A's in general. And I was talking with Rob Meyer and Brian Wetzel about what makes a good owner and a bad owner of a ball club, right? And there's a lot of hate going towards Mark Davis. If this team was winning, no one would care, right? I mean, they'd be like, greatest team ever, right? Because everybody's dumb when they don't win, and everybody's a genius when they do. What do you
Yeah.
think? What makes a good owner?
Wow, that's a great question. And I was following some of those commentators. I think you have to throw the Kings owner Vivek Ramadeve in there,
Mm-hmm.
NBA. Why? Because he was the savior of the Kings, right? He was the guy that kept them from leaving. He stepped in and did what the Moose could, et cetera, et cetera. But now it's run out on a rail, Vivek Ramadeve and the curse of Fisher with so he's a terrible owner.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think you have to break it down into little pieces. I think you have to because you see a lot of people say, well, he's not putting the money in the team. Let's talk about Fisher. Fisher could have signed the Soderstrom type person years ago. He just never did. Okay, let's say that you're running a business, Pete, and you make buggy whips, and maybe we'll talk about the
Mm-hmm.
buggy whip factory later on. But you're making buggy whips. Actually, you're not making any right now. You got a great idea. You know how to make them. You learn how to do it. You know where to get the material. How are you going to fund your business? Are you going to take all your savings and pour it in there? Maybe. It's quite risky. Are you going to put it on your credit card? You need $10,000 to start. Yeah, well, maybe that's expensive. Are you going to go around and ask people to contribute to your business? Well, you got to convince them it's a good business and show them you're going to, do what? Make money. You go to a bank. Uh, Great ideas always have great banks, right? So if you
Mm-hmm.
have, if you're a poor, I used to tell this all the time in my circuit around the poor countries I lived in. If you go to a bank or to an institution in your community that lends money, and you've got a great idea, well thought out with a business plan, and you know what's going to happen a year down the road, 5 years down the road, you're going to be banked because people can see where you're going. You're going to make money, and that's a trick. You're going to make money. So let's go back to the idea of a good owner being someone that meets higher demands for payroll. I disagree with that view of that being a good owner, because
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you take all your parents' money and maybe you have $1 million and you throw it all into the buggy whip manufacturing. How many buggy whips, Pete, do you use on your Ford F-150 these days to make those horses run?
This is zero.
Zero buggy whips. So that would be a bad investment, although you could do it.
Yeah.
Now, let's say you have a
Someone
team that
sells a lot of buggy whips.
you know what? Pause.
Yeah.
I spoke about buggy whips a long time. The people in an industry that's gone on for 100 years, a very noble industry, sugarcane
Mm-hmm.
cutting. I don't know,
Sure.
buggy whip manufacturing.
Yeah.
My grandfather, his grandfather, I said, a family line of proud buggy whip makers. I don't care. Model T
Mm-hmm.
came around and we don't need them anymore. So we need to find something else for you all to do. It's really
Yeah.
unfortunate, and let's celebrate how glorious the buggy whip industry was and all this stuff that it built, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's painful and so on, but we need to teach you how to make wire harnesses or something, right? Same sort of
Right.
concept. You wrap the thing around and now you're making wire harnesses. That's great. You go to the bank and get money for wire harnesses where you couldn't get it for the buggy whips. So going back to the baseball, you throw, you have $1 billion because your parents did well, and you got a bunch of stuff going on. Yeah, you could throw all your money down payroll for next year's team at a place that sells 6,000 tickets a day, maybe, and
Mm-hmm.
has no luxury seats, no sponsorships. You're not going to see a return on that investment. So are you running a pro bono shop? Are you running a charity? No, you're not. Because what can you do with that money? We talked about this last time. I
Yeah.
could. with that money, I have opportunity cost that I'm foregoing. I could take that money and put it in a bank account and make 3%. I could put that money and buy real estate and make 10% over a certain period of time. So why am I
Yeah.
going to take that money and throw it into a ball club, which is not, as much as I might like baseball, I'll be broke. And not only that, I won't incentivize fixing the problem, right?
Yeah.
Because how do the banks do it, right? If you go to a bank and you got a great idea, it's not just, okay, here, sign here. No, they check your accounts. They make, show me that business plan again. Where are you?
Mhm.
Where are you at in 3 years? What's your hiring profile? What's your cash flow profile? And if you don't have it right, they don't just refuse you. They're like, no, try it this way. So debt
Yeah.
disciplines. When you have debt, it disciplines you to do the right things with your business. And the same is true of baseball. You can't just write checks willy-nilly. It just won't work that way. You've got to get a return on your investment. The stadium in Oakland wasn't allowing the business unit that was the ball club to make money, to pay for those contracts, to have a return on that investment. They probably, it looks like they're projecting that they will have that money in Vegas for whatever reason. I think it's stuff they haven't shared with us yet, but they
Yeah.
certainly felt like a 7-year commitment for up to 113 million was okay, with more coming.
Yeah. Well, and maybe there was enough revenue flow there to justify something like that if these things happen or these conditions are met. Another thing, when we move, we're gonna sell our house. You go to your realtor and you're like, our house is kind of fucked up. There's a bunch of things we need to fix. I guess we'll spend a bunch of money. And the realtor's like, hold on, you're moving. We're not doing that. We're not going to change your counters. We are going to paint this house. We are going to do this. And so you pick your spots, because the rest of it you pass on to the next person, and you're not trying to trick them. You're like, hey, this roof, you're going to need to replace it. We've taken $10,000 off And so when you're always about to move any kind of business, you're just you can't put on a big load of debt. And if you're going to sell the business, guess what? No one wants to buy a bunch of bad contracts, right? And so we're desperate for them to sell and spend and all these things. Everybody's got their hands in John Fisher's pockets, but this is a problem that predates him by a long way.
I think you can also look at what Major League Baseball did and be guided by that, right? So there is, and we can talk about this later on because it is important and I don't want to discount it, the concept of community involvement and what it means to be a fan, or what it means to have a fan base for 50 some years and so forth. And there is a community benefit to that. And I think baseball understands it. That's why the major sports leagues understand it. That's why you have the relocation fees, right? So that's why you have $380 million or up to $1 billion, or whatever the case might be. Baseball recognized what was happening in Oakland and how much the A's had worked together, without qualifying it, because there's an awful lot of people that opine about the quality of that working together, whatever, be that as it may. The owners agreed that there had been sufficient working together to say, hey, we're sorry that didn't work out. We will waive your relocation fee. So that made Vegas happen. If you have a relocation fee, it's suddenly gone from a $2 billion stadium, which is a lot, to a 2.5 billion stadium. That maybe the numbers don't work out that well. Maybe it's a different deal. And so that's why the non-relocation stuff with the relocation fees are in there to because you really, the leagues don't want people doing this. That's why Kansas City is moving to Kansas, I guess, and not someplace else. And besides, another pause, who knew that was such a big deal, right? I mean, the 49ers moved farther than the Chiefs are planning to move, and no one, everyone's fine. But, I guess that's a Republic thing I don't quite get.
And if you know the KC area, that Legends area where that is, where the NASCAR track is and all that, that's been targeted for stadiums the entire time. It's always been like, how do we get this business out of Missouri and into Kansas? We're going to build this spot and we're going to build these incentives. And Pete always says, Pete talking with the third person, everything's a competition.
He's a great guy.
Everything's a competition. And so the mayors of Kansas City, they're going to have to fight it out. And Oakland didn't have the foresight or the ability or the bank to get behind their stuff.
I think there was that's probably a topic for other shows with different people, but I think there was a lot of historical baggage around the makeup of the council, the history of the community, the composition of the owner group, on and on and on and on. It was going to be a really hard lift for those guys. But one of the posters on X, who certainly hasn't been pro relocation, I think is been pretty straight about things, reporting on them. Had a post earlier this week where he was across, I guess he was at the Oyo, and he took a picture of the stadium being built, and he called seeing that stadium being built after 30 years of not having a stadium or looking for a stadium cathartic. And you scroll, but sometimes you scroll and you pause and you think about that. It's like, yeah, when you peel apart all that other stuff. So yes, very difficult. Yes, cathartic. The incentive is a big issue. We can talk about how those incentives are structured. The league wanted the A's here in Vegas, pretty clear. It was going to be hard for Salt Lake City or Portland or other people to create an incentive package that would convince the league or the A's to go anyplace but here. I think in retrospect, I didn't know it at the time. Because I believed everybody saying it wasn't going to happen in Vegas. There was so much salting of the earth and just like, oh, it'll never happen. I started, in some days believing it myself. But that's why it was so important those days of in Carson City with SB 509 and then SB 1 after the special session to get that done. Once it was done, it was pretty much a fait accompli.
This is a silly thing, but if you choose to be involved in these things and you actually read the legislation, you're gobsmacked by the level of detail and all of the things that are laid out. And a lot of it is to the state, the county, the city's advantage. They're like, you're going to make sure that you guys are held accountable for all of these things. Now, is it going to be perfect? No, but it is the representation of 35 years of stadium building and what the state of the art looks like, right? Could they do a better job the next time around? Yeah, of course. They're going to continue. The next deal is going to be better than this deal. They're going to continue to figure out how to balance that thing. But the influence part is billionaires getting handouts, and it's like, well, no,
billionaires are getting compensated for doing something they otherwise would not do. So, for example, in the case of the A's ballpark, it's pretty simple. So the Tropicana was going away, now or in a couple of years. It was old and it needed to go. Absent everything else, all other things remaining equal, no SB1, no baseball, no. What's going to go in the corner of Las Vegas Boulevard and Tropicana?
Yeah,
I bet a mega casino resort would go there.
Yeah.
Okay, so fine. So the state and the county folks and LVCVA think very smartly, you know what, we got a lot of those, and maybe we need something a little bit different. Maybe we need to have a more family-friendly situation. Maybe we need to have, sports. Obviously, that's what they've chosen, because you have the Raiders, you have the Aces, you have, on and on and on and on. So they created an incentive, a reason to say, hey, Bally's or whomever, don't build a casino there by itself. Build a casino and a ballpark. It's in our community interest to do that. Now, if you disagree with that, that's fine. That's actually a really good political battleground, and you can fight that out in campaigns. You can recall people, whatever you want to do if you disagree with the decision they made. Once you agree that it's a good idea to draw something to your community that's not a mega resort in that corridor, then the way you choose to fund it just becomes a question of economics and whether your balance sheet can handle it. It's not the billionaire being greedy or not.
Yeah, no, and again, like no movie gets made without someone putting money in a billionaire's pocket to make a movie. It's just like all these things take time and money. Another thing to point out is, like you said, people are often, and it's not wrong, but it's not as right as they need it to be, talking about Indian casinos and how they've drained away a lot of the gambling business. When I walk through Vegas, there's never anybody really gambling like the old days. I think that business is what it is, and they know how to manage it and whatever, but they're not going to get back to that packed house all the time, low limit. This is not what works for them. And they got smart people working there. But the reality is that when Mullah MGM goes to LVCVA and says, brother, we will not build a casino on next across from us. And when Caesars puts the czar in Caesar, because that's what that word means, they're like, hey, listen, stay on the other casinos say. We're not doing that, right? And so there is a shakily kind of agreement that has to happen. Who knows what that looks like? Maybe it's
who was going to build the next casino was not going to be those guys. It was going to be like GLPI or some Indian casino in California, and that's why they didn't want that stuff happening.
And those sheikhs don't want that. They don't want that. And so they're like, hey, you're not going to build that thing here. Let's find it. And then what do? They're like, here's what we'll do. And maybe they did nothing. But there is a trade of something happening to where the LBCVA is like, we can set, because they aren't dumb either. They're the best convention and visitor authority in the world. Like, can we fill a 30 seat, seat stadium? Let's make sure we put some convention space in it. Every place in Vegas on the Strip has convention space, and they will absolutely go out and hunt, and they will sell tickets. And that's why they, like the guy, I don't know if he's on my next, but he complained about the LVCVA giving out a bunch of F1 tickets. If they were in such high demand, right? Because they know what they're doing, man. Stop, because oh my God. Anyhow, so the Shakely deals happen because that town is very flat. There's, it's not like New York where you have like this giant group of age-old, decades, 100-year-old money. Like, this is a very new money place. So everybody knows everybody in Vegas. Very flat city in terms of influence.
So can I show you an economic model? I promise it won't hurt.
Yes, do it. I'm going to make you bigger. Here we go.
Well,
you are now the biggest you can be.
So it's actually a pretty complex theory. We're not going to get into the complexities of it. My favorite way to do economics, it's called Hotelling's theory of location. So we're going to imagine, if we can get it up here on the screen. Oh yeah. Here is a beach, and that's the ocean, and there's some ships. And here's the beach with all the people. Now the people, and this is an economic model, right? So models only we talked about homelessness having many different issues under the rubric of homelessness. Economies have bajillions of them. We're just going to talk about one thing. And so imagine our beach, and on this beach, the people only want ice cream. And the only thing really that matters to them is how far on the beach they walk to get their ice cream. So if you're an entrepreneur making your ice cream cart, locating it, where would you put along this line? Where would you put your ice cream cart to maximize or minimize the distance traveled by your farthest customer?
Somewhere by a bunch of them dots.
Right in the middle, to be honest.
Okay. He's building his ice cream shack right now.
Well, I did a terrible job. So right there, let's call that the middle, and that's where your ice cream shack goes. Because then these people walk that far, and these people walk this far. Hey, good for these people. They live close. Okay. Mm-hmm. So far, so good on the model. What happens when entrepreneur number 2 with their ice cream truck comes? Are they going to go here?
No. Yes.
No, because then they capture these people. Everybody halfway to this guy goes that way, and this person gets all these people.
Right.
So the only logical place for ice cream person number 2 to go is right next door to this guy.
Right next door.
Right next door. You've seen it in some of these countries where we've lived.
Oh my gosh.
My washing machine in Mexico broke, and so I had to get a part. Where's the washing machine part sold in Mexico? Oh, there's a street. What do you mean there's a street? There's a street. So I go to the street, and by gosh, there were like 8 stores that sold the exact same gear. So I don't know.
Can I say something about this? I don't want to I'm going to say something about this because this matters. When you go to a place like Mexico, or you go to Iraq, or wherever it is, and you have this strip of convenience stores, this is where the Hernandezes go. This is where the Sanchez's go. This is where, and so all of these places belong to I will say a tribe, right? And so no, we don't go to Ted, we go to Rick, and that's how these things work around the world. That's how this stuff works, and that's why you see them all in the same spot because they all have the same uncle. Yes, you will go next to this person over here. That is what, and then it's done. And the guy breaks off some money, but he's going to get his money back, even if lending's illegal in Islam. He is going to get his money back. Sorry, I had to because there was a little bit of context I love to put in there.
And I'm sure the same thing happens with ice cream. So here's our ice cream trucks, and here are the people. The farthest doesn't have to travel that far, right? Here we go. They're okay. Mm-hmm. Now the model gets complex, and too complex for my taste if you add more, because then people start moving around and stuff. But let's just leave it like this, because this is where I want to talk about incentives. Now, we have these 2 ice cream stands, and they're doing great, and they're selling ice cream, making money hand over fist. It's a hot day. But these people are grumpy. That's so far. How come the ice cream truck didn't move over here? We want it here. I don't want to walk so far. So a group of them will get together, and they're going to pool their money together. They'll tax each other. They'll give a portion of something that they work together to make to incentivize one of these guys to move their ice cream operation closer to where they live. They'll move the ice cream closer to them. Now, that's going to cost I mean, so this person no longer is here, right? So they've moved. They're no longer there. They moved over here.
Yep.
They're going to lose if you go take the halfway point, right? So now they're over here. The people that are here are going to walk there. The people that are here now, they're like, well, I'm going to go to this other guy. And then that other guy gets all these people over here. So this person lost that much business.
Yeah.
Right. So that much business has a dollar amount. How much, and that's going to be it for the chart. That lost business has a dollar amount as it represents to the ice cream person of how much business they lost by locating where that community wanted to locate. So that incentive package better at least make them whole for that move.
Yeah.
Now, that's great. The people are like, yeah, okay, fine. You know, it's worth it to us because all we really care about is walking to ice cream. So they do it. The ice cream guy's like, yeah, that's fine. But then everyone else is like, man, what a crock that is. Or how come billionaires get all the money to move their ice cream, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
They say, well, the person could pay for it themselves. You know, they could pay their own tax. Well, they could pay their own tax, but they're getting it paid by these chaps that don't want to walk to the ice cream. So that's what's happening, right? So that's an incentive. You don't anticipate earning anything off of that other than triggering the behavior that you want to have happen, which you agreed to, like you said, in advance through your non-relocation agreement, through your, what do they call that thing that the county signed, development agreement, all that stuff. Right. You get it all on paper. What's my tax money go for? And then that's it. It's not an investment. They don't get to make business decisions about what flavor of ice cream. They don't get to, you know, with outside the rules that they've agreed to, shutter the business or move it again, or whatever the case might be. I mean, you've seen this, I'm sure, overseas as well. You know, these communities that really depend on helpers to get their economy moving forward in these development agreements are only as their success depends wholly on two things: how good that agreement is, how good that contract is, and how good they are at enforcing it. Because we see our friends, the Chinese, all the time throughout Africa, sign many agreements. We're going to make a railroad for you. Or one of my favorites in a country I won't name, we're going to build a road. Yeah, we want a road. We'll build a road for you. Okay. So they go and cut the ribbon on the road. It's a painted on road. It's a bunch of gravel painted black. And they're like, what? The contract said road. And that's it, right? So maybe your contract should have said paved road to like 6 inches depth and using asphalt. I don't know. So that's where your contract has to be good.
Yeah, and you're 100% right in that. We did a thing where like, I will build the park for you. Okay, you build the park. We'll give you $500,000 to build a park out here. And I went, because this is what I do. I went ahead of time and I looked and I took pictures, talked to people. When do you want a park and all that kind of thing? Anyhow, great idea. So we come back at the ribbon cutting, nothing. Zero things have changed. We stacks $500,000 for a park. Not a blade of grass, no teeter-totters, none of that.
It's a park. Look at the sign.
When the colonel got mad, he's like, hey, what the hell? Like, you didn't do anything. We're already obliged to pay them. Although he's a goddamn colonel with an infantry battalion, but, you know, whatever. The guy's like, yes, here it is. This is a park.
Goes on for miles. Should be very happy, very proud. First park in the community.
Yeah. Well, I think about this. The incentive for him to do that was, I'll take this risk and see what happens. And then the colonel easily could have said, we're not going to pay you, but that would have cost him more. That could have cost him his career. And so that would have ended.
Hey, where's the train? How come the train didn't come? Where's the train with our weapons? Where's the train with our soldiers? Where's the train with those promises that the politicians? Well, what do you mean so-and-so said we didn't pay up when we should have?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. No, that happens. Speaking of incentives, go ahead.
Please. No, you go. Because I was going to change.
I was going to say on the incentive, we can talk about that real quick, right? Because we certainly know what SB1 has for the A's ballpark, right? The government side of things, it's got the bonds, it's got transferable tax credits, which means you incur a tax, but you don't have to pay the tax. In fact, you can take these little coupons that otherwise would be your tax and sell them to somebody else. So that's quite nice. That's money. That's money in their pockets. That makes them do what they need to do. If you look at the Kansas City deal, and I haven't gone over it with a fine tooth comb,
Right.
but they do something, and it's similar to what the Raiders did. There's a bit of it too with the A's thing for the bonds, but the bond issuance is not that much. The Chiefs thing might be a lot, and the Raiders thing is quite a bit. They create those special sports districts, right? So any economic activity that occurs in the special sports district has a portion or all of the tax that goes back to servicing the bonds. Now, in the case of Allegiant Stadium, it's got the footprint. You know, all the Raider image stores that are throughout the valley. My recollection is that those are within the footprint as well, because they're part of the enterprise, and so those tax receipts and so forth fund the waterfall. So that's all in the agreement.
Funded because like anybody who signs a license within these county areas who has a licensing sales agreement for Raiders gear is now part of that district. Is that how it's written?
You could, I bet you can make the case. I'd have to look and see how Fanatic does it, right? So they certainly have a component that they're out there by the racetrack here in the valley. They have a component of their production that is Raiders stuff. I don't know how far down the agreement goes with regard to the special tax district, if it's just at the retail level or if it's at a wholesale level. That would be interesting, because if they would incentivize there's that word again, they would incentivize production of the product in the area that's in the district. So I don't know how that works. I suspect it's just retail, but you could design it however you want. Right now, if you look at the Kansas City thing, they have a very large footprint. I mean, they're talking about a sports district that encompasses a major part of their metropolitan area over there. I bet it's related, and this is where the deeper dive would be helpful. I bet it's related to the whole Legends area and all the money that goes into the Star bonds and so on and so forth. You look at Howard Terminal. That was the people that are honest talking about what happened to Oakland and the A's, going back to Howard Terminal, will remember that the city council had a big problem. They never said it though, but it's obvious what happened. They had a big problem giving the A's 2 special tax districts. They were allowed to do so by the state government. The state government allowed, and I think it's AB 249, Skinner people talk about a lot, allowed for the special tax districts for that project to occur in that area. They were going to put it over the Howard Terminal project, and they're going to put it over Jack London Square. Jack London Square, properly developed, is a treasure chest. That's like giving up the crown jewels of the region. Why would you want to fund the development using the tax receipts from a fully developed Jack London Square? So I can see the problem, but that's, for the A's, that's where the money broke. That's where the incentive wasn't big enough. Okay.
Ever since I was a kid, Jack London Square has been up and coming.
Right?
It's always like, oh yeah, we're going to develop that. It's going to be great. 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 And
there'll be a park there.
Booms and busts a little bit, but it doesn't. They never got around to it, right? And this is the thing where, like, if you don't allow the people who push things, the business people who are like, I'll take that. They find the risk they'll take, and then they rip the check, and maybe it fails, right? Like Kansas City has I think it's called Power and Light District. You see a lot of these things. We're like, we're gonna have a cowboy bar. No, we're gonna have another kind of bar, and we're gonna have you can open container, everybody, drink all you, but you still have to make those businesses work, and you got to drive people to those places, and it's hard. And I don't know where that place is at right now, but in some places they work, in some places they don't. It's kind of like the modern version of a mall.
Well, so in these development agreements, and we saw a little bit of a window on that, although it's a different kettle of fish altogether, in the Vegas deal, where they're going to have a police substation, a fire substation at the ballpark, right? And that's part of the development agreement. So with Jack London Square, and again, I don't want to go too far afield here because I don't live there, and so I don't know. But if security is an issue and you have a problem with the OPD doing its thing consistently and too many other needs, well, over your district, you create a special set of fundings and whatever you want to call them, set up the rules of engagement, however you want to set them up, whatever it is, make it so the people can walk around there and not have a problem.
Sure.
It's that's always been something I look at as part of the issue, but there's lots of other issues around Jack London Square, but we've seen it over and over again. I mean, you need people living in a place, buying stuff at that place, commuting. In fact, that's not a verb. Making a community in the place, and I think the ballers, I think other people around that area do that really well in Oakland. But anyway, Jack London Square would be great, and you're exactly right. It would be great. I said that 20 years ago.
Yeah, but there's a train going through the middle of it. I saw a great show with Rick.
Yeah,
Caruso.
that's kind of cool though.
Great. No, it is, but you have to. This is what Rick Caruso was saying. He's like, you have to either celebrate or like hide. right? And so you're not going to hide that thing. But also, the next time someone gets wackoed by that train in the middle of the night, it won't be the last time it happens, right? And so you do have to find these trade-offs. Yoshi's has not turned into a bigger place. It's nice, it's wonderful, but they haven't thrived to the point where like we have had a bust out. Matter of fact, there were less Yoshi's than there were 30 years ago because there used to be one in San Francisco. So it's I don't want to get away from this because I want to talk about so I was saying, like, first off, this is the first purpose-built A's ballpark in like 100 years. And that's amazing that they finally get their own place for the first time in forever. And they should have had it 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago now. That would have been the time to do it back when it would have cost $35-40 million to build one. It would have been paid off the bonds and everything else. But we didn't do that. And so all the other teams got the advantage of the state-of-the-art at the time agreements that were out there. The Indians went from being nothing to something. The Baltimore Orioles had a great run in the 90s. They've had a little bit of trouble here and there since then, but yeah. And they have figured it out. We never figured it out. So now we're finally getting to that model. This is what I was talking about. That's the model I meant. We're like, now we can secure our young talent and grow with them and then add free agents and still do what we already do, which is find talent, develop it. But that model is a little bit old for development. You thought I meant something totally different.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No. It's interesting because there's these two things where there are two conundrums that are going on simultaneously.
So if you look at the Moneyball era that happened, and I was paying close attention to it, read the book, saw the movie in the correct sequence, and just listen to every single one of those games. I knew what was going on. They were onto something. People were casting aside all these folks that could get on base, and everyone knows the story, and so that's great. And the A's were on the forefront, and off they went. That's fine. They haven't been participating in creating whatever new version of Moneyball it's going to be. And that's about players. If you extrapolate that whole concept into a revenue stream, anybody entering the game right now with a brand new stadium and now flush money, your pocketbook's finally big. Isn't that great? Hey, guess what happens next year? CBA negotiations. Guess what happens after that? Do you think RSNs are the way they're going to do it? No. There's 2, maybe 3 giant cash cows. I'm probably mixing metaphors in a very inappropriate way, creating teats against which all 28 other teams suckle. And I'm talking about the Dodgers money, there's 3, right? Boston money and New York money. Those guys have a lot of money in their RSNs, and they created their own networks and they do their own thing, and so much money. So you've got revenue sharing. They try and take some of that, whatever rickety system has been cobbled together over the past couple of CBAs, it's probably coming to an end. Why? Because cable's coming to an end, and we're seeing what happened with Bally Sports Network, no relation to Bally's Casino, and FanDuel Sports Network, Diamond Sport, whatever you want to call them, all the ones that are going away and changing their names and stuff. That's just a symptom of what's really bothering the industry underneath, and that is advertisement eyeballs on screens and so on and so forth. Yeah. Something's going to change, and it's got to take the pie away from those big networks and somehow make it all the same, and that's going to be a problem, but it's going to happen. So my point was, just when the A's get money in their pocketbook and got that whole thing figured out, their entire way of funding a baseball team's operations is going to change. Oops. Yeah. No, that's helpful. I'm ready. I am ready. I'm ready. Here I am. Where did I sign up?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and at least they're up to speed in some way, right? But the game doesn't slow down, and baseball's always hard. And then everybody's competing for talent. And I've been saying this a lot. It's not just the talent on the field, everybody. It's not just 5 starters. You've got to have front office people that are state-of-the-art thinkers that are pushing and figuring out how to find talent. One of the things about Moneyball was saying, hey, how can we get ahead of everybody else? The book was written in the era of on-base percentage. An era or 2 later, Billy Beane's like, hey, everybody's saying pound the bottom of the zone. So who scoops home runs out of bottom of the zone pitches? And just go get these guys because they're not costing anything. So they got Chris Davis, and Chris Davis is like, I'm just going to hit 40 home runs, right? And he wasn't a great player, but the league was always like, laughing at the A's. Oh, they're so sucky. They can make all these dumb moves. Meanwhile, he's like, I'm ahead of you. Now, I don't know if the A's are still ahead, but it seems like that they do a pretty good job. But they would make these trades, and not all trades work out, but they did that pretty well. So can they continue to stay ahead? Only if they're putting a lot of money in the front office, because this is what the Dodgers beat everybody. The A's have to do this. the Dodgers are now investing in Asia in a way that is making it like a satellite market for them. And it didn't work out great for Seattle, but it's working out good for LA. And if you establish ties to Taiwan and everything else, yeah.
I was going to say there was the little bit of news maybe 8-9 months ago where they were getting Suga from BTS or whatever it was, trying to invest a modest amount of money in it. That's why they did it. They weren't. It was, oh, Fisher's so broke. He's, no, BS. They want that Korea connection. If they can get the Dodgers or whomever over there on the Japan thing, and it's been tried before, so who knows? But that would be great. And then of course we have connections direct to Seoul, all this other stuff. Who knows that that's going to happen?
Right.
Before I forget, and maybe it wasn't on your channel, maybe it was somewhere else. They had a guy that was talking about what needs to happen. Maybe they need to limit the number of pitchers on a roster so that your starter has to go longer.
That was my show. Yeah, okay. Rob and I.
Well. I think velo is a major problem. I think velo is a major problem across and you can't regulate it, right? But
I mean, you can.
My goodness, I don't know. I mean, you can regulate it not directly. You can regulate it by other ways. But if handling that much heat requires you to be a certain type of player, I don't know. I just think if you can somehow make those guys have to pitch longer, or they tried it with the downfall of the loogie.
Yeah. Right. Well, so here's what you do. You get, I'm just throwing a number out there. You get 2 100-mile-an-hour pitchers a game. Any pitch after that, that's 100 miles an hour, is a no pitch. Batter can decide the outcome. If you swing and hit a home run, you can keep the outcome. Otherwise, pitch again. And so now you're forced to abide by this speed limit. I know that sounds weird. It sounds uncomfortable, but here's the thing I've known for 20 plus years. If a guy can throw 103 miles an hour, he's going to get hurt. That is the norm. Some guys avoid it. Chapman avoided it. But that's like, I can name guys like Matt Anderson, Joel Zumaya, all these guys. Even Verlander eventually blew his arm out throwing 100 plus miles an hour. He lasted a long time, but it will happen. So, yeah, just cap it and say illegal pitch, and we can see the pitch every time, right? And the league would have to control those guns and calibrate them and all that kind of thing. But that's minor. That's minor stuff. So there's interesting.
Maybe I'll accept it if they can do it with a ghost runner. I really hate that. Anyway, that's far.
Let me just say this. This is funny. So I said this to Rob several years ago, and he's like, "No, that's a bad idea." And then a couple times of him coming back on, he's like, "My friend was saying to me, he called them speedies. Maybe limit to 100." And I'm like, "Rob, I told you this 2 years ago." And he's like, "Oh my God, you did." And I'm not saying
except check or money order.
Yeah. So the whole thing, though, with trying to understand how to run a modern ball club, it's not just like, here's another thing, and I want your professional thoughts on this. It's not just sign free agents, because if you would have signed Cespedes, that would have been a bad contract. Nobody's mad that they didn't sign Zito to an extension, right? Like, these things work to their benefit. So we don't ever study those misses. When you look at the A's and where they're at now, they're not in Vegas right now. Right now, they're in a small ballpark that's limited on what they can do. It's not state of the art. But it is the Major League ballpark right now. Probably one of the nicest ones in the league because they put a bunch of money into it. They don't have an extra $30 million to commit for 10 years, right? That would take up all of any kind of wiggle room they have. That would eat all of it up. And so you don't need to sign Kurtz now. He's controlled. There's time to do it. Yes, it'll be expensive, but it's never going to be cheap. So I don't know. Should we expect a lot of big moves in Vegas or before Vegas? Or is it time for just, like they did a lot this year? And there's not
that's a great question.
Really,
I was surprised. To be honest, I was surprised by Soderstrom. He was a person I was ready to cut early last year. Surprisingly enough, before he was jamming up the works. I knew Kurtz was behind him. There's no way he can play left field. All these things we know now are different. Yeah. But at the time, I was ready to go. And so I don't know. It seems like we need pitching. I think the Severino room is probably not going to be. Having them all beat the door down to want to sign for one more year, because there's probably only one more year in Sacramento. I think we're losing 2027. So whatever that looks like too, which is another reason not to sign these guys until after that. I don't know. You have to. That's where it gets into, again, going back to the good owner, bad owner thing, right? You have to. This is where you would hope you've got somebody that knows baseball or has people around them that they trust that knows baseball. And that's where, because, they somewhere, remember we talked about that blank piece of paper that then gets filled up? I bet in the baseball world that gets filled up with who should we sign and who should go after and all that sort of thing. And you put it in front of your president and there's a little, you remember those little signature blocks where it says yes and no, and you
Yeah.
wait to see which one the guy signs or the lady signs. That's where you measure the value and the worth of a good owner or a bad owner.
Yeah.
If you know baseball, if you've been around it actually, you mentioned NASCAR. You can see this in NASCAR. The best and most successful NASCAR people are the people that have been in the garage for a really, really long time. Maybe Michael Jordan is an exception, but he's been following the sport forever, and he's got a
Mhm.
lot of people around him that also know it and love it and so forth. So if you've got people that can make an informed decision and take the risk, that's all you really want out of a manager or out of a president, out of an owner. And if they repeatedly screw that part of it up, not because they don't have the funds to do it, but because they keep signing Anthony Rendon type people for 10 years and buying
Yeah.
out, whatever number of that. If you keep doing that over and over again, well, then maybe we can talk. I don't think John Fisher as an owner, I don't think the clock has started yet on whether or not he's a good owner or bad owner, to be honest. I would
Yeah.
have liked the stadium thing to be fixed a lot sooner beforehand, and that really does fall to him. Somehow that
A
should have
bit.
been
A
resolved
bit.
before.
I think baseball also tied his hands for a long time. And by the way, let's not ignore Lou Wolf, because Lou was there and he was running things, and so a lot of the angry A's fans tend to ignore him. Fisher. Calm down for a second. The guy was there before Fisher and left in frustration, everybody. So when I think about these things, I also realize anybody who's been in business or works for somebody close to the top of the business, if you do take that thing, that sheet, that paper, then going back to the very beginning that you had, here's my plan. And Mark Bedine goes, I'm not feeling it, man. Sorry. Or he goes, you know what? I can go to Shake MGM, or no, I call him Mola MGM. I think I can get that. I think get that money out of him. Yeah, you know what? Let me go see if I can get that money out. And I'm using, because we're talking about what we did before. Or I'll go see the czar. And the czar, I think, will pay for that. We've been working on something. This is the perfect thing, and I'll have them pay for soda. And I'm not saying that this happened.
Yeah. You're going to get a patch on the
marketing.
sleeve. You're going to get a run on something. They'll show up. We don't even know. There'll be signs, right?
Yeah.
It'll be that I won the lottery. You won't know, but there may be signs.
But that's Mark's job, is to go, yeah, we can afford that. We can't afford that yet, right? And so no one's spending money that they can't afford. And could they spend more? Sure, but they're the ones looking at the spreadsheet. And I'll say one more thing too. You talked about bonds earlier. There's all kinds of bonds. One of them are surety bonds. Nobody in the insurance business writes a surety bond hoping that it fails. They only write these things because they're only going to make money on it. And they buy a position above the position, above the position, above the position, because they just want to get back into the gravy line. They want less and less risk and less and less money. The second those surety bonds got written, it's over. It's over. Nothing is going to stop this thing. And for anybody who thinks like they're not showing the money, do you think the Travelers Group doesn't look? You think Citibank doesn't look at the fine? I'll tell you right now, I worked in that industry. They see everything. So the stuff the players don't get to see, these guys get to see. And they don't, Travelers doesn't lose money. Any of the surety companies, all of them, you can go look them up. They don't lose money on bonds ever.
Yeah. And then we talked too, I think, about, McDonald's helps the franchisees. When you buy into a McDonald's franchise or you buy one, they're not just sending you napkins and stuff, right? They send you to Hamburger U. They send some people down and make sure everything's cool and you're flipping things right and everyone knows what's. There's a lot of care and feeding that goes on with making sure that your franchisees are successful. I'll be honest, I have not been in the commissioner of baseball's office or the building or whatever, but I anticipate that they do something similar, right? You can't have a team that's consistently handing out Burger King napkins in the wrong restaurant.
Yeah. And some places have intractable problems that they're not sure what, if anything, they could ever do. And that's why they're intractable, that. And I don't know how you fix Miami. It's a very, very hard problem to solve. And I'm sure they want to, but what do you do? And then does it hurt the brand more to do something about it? Or do they just let that team be like a weak link,
What did you think of Kansas City with like the little Amtrak station or whatever? So hey, Royals, look at all this space here. I thought that was awesome, right? That's like Kansas City, just the Sharks smell blood and they're just lining up. I found that to be great, but that's the nature of an incentive. And again, you're not, I don't know. There's a very big business I found, or maybe it's just true on X. I don't know. These true believers that no public-private partnerships should occur for ballparks. I mean, you'll never get your investment back, Well, because it's not an investment, it's an incentive, and we don't want it back because, we're eating ice cream over here. Leave us alone.
Yeah. Well, and not all the academic literature agrees on this stuff, right? And let's also understand that the academic literature is written by a bunch of folks who are from one particular political leaning, and so if they don't like that stuff, they're going to write things that don't work that way. But if you look at the value of it, and I'll tell you an example right now, when the Cardinals were looking to get their new stadium, they weren't having a lot of luck, and so they said, you know what we should do? We should look at just popping over the border to Illinois. And all of a sudden, St. Louis is like, hold on a second. And the sheikhs got together and the fucking sheikhs made a deal. And let's figure it out. Even if it's not a good deal on paper here like this, what's better? Having that team right there with the view of the arch. And that ballpark is gorgeous. Or having it over in Illinois. And they were never going to go to Illinois. Everybody knew that.
In negotiations, they had that term called BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And if your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, i.e. your agreement failed, if the best alternative was they're going to leave your town, well, the other side knew that you had probably a little bit more skin to put in that game.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone that negotiates or does it professionally, first thing you need to do is understand the other team's BATNA. And it's like, what happens if it fails? How much will that hurt?
One more real quick thing about owners too. So nobody's mad at the Ricketts family, and the Ricketts family bought the Cubs. They spent a lot of money. They won a title for the first time, and so that's paid the bills for a little bit of time. But it's hyper expensive. It's so hard to get tickets. They scalp their own tickets. They can sell their tickets 3 times because they can scalp the scalping and put the scalp. It's amazing how much money they draw in, and all of those rooftop houses around them, they bought them out, and that's not just because they're nice. That's a REIT. And they got a bunch of other people's money and they bought those buildings, and everybody's making a lot of money doing that, right? Nobody's mad at those guys. Nobody's mad at those guys. You're like, well, their payroll's big. They're not winning. They're competitive. They're sort of afraid of last year, but they're not going to sign Kyle Tucker back, right? And so are they mad? Is Ricketts a good owner or a bad owner? They should for sure make a lot of money.
Whatever decision, I mean, I don't think baseball, or really, I can't think of any sports, maybe football, I don't know, where the metrics are visible and agreed on about what makes an owner a good owner or a bad owner. Certainly wins and losses, I don't think are fair. I mean, ultimately, yeah, I guess, but if you can't consider the constraints the person's under and so on and so forth, then I don't know. I would hope that model can somehow change as the league moves forward, so that the owners fail or succeed based upon their baseball acumen, and not upon necessarily geographic location or metro. I don't even know how you get there. I have no idea. Yeah. But it's all noise unassociated with the skill of the owner, baseball skill, that sometimes is indistinguishable from true success.
Can we say the quiet part out loud? One of the reasons why there's a balanced schedule with universal interleague play is because when the Yankees, Dodgers, Cubs, Red Sox, Mets, Braves come to town, all those teams, everybody in that town makes money. And that's how you put more butts in the seats. You get the teams that travel well and you just spread them around. And that's why they do that. Not because of like, oh, it would be neat. It's never because
how many times can Real Madrid play Barcelona? And why do they play in all of the cities of Spain?
Right.
Or even other places in Europe? I think it's probably a global problem.
It is, right? And that's just what it is. And that is a way of sharing the revenue. And it's harmless, and we all get to. Everybody wants to see the Yankees anyhow, so it is an elegant way to spread the money around without having to go into somebody else's pocket. It's like, yeah, bring the Yankees over here, we'll split the gate and do whatever we do. But yeah, the Twins, all these folks who are like, there's always visit, yeah, that's every major market that isn't New York, LA. I mean, even when Oakland, I don't know how many games you've been to, like when you've seen this. If the Yankees were in town, it was a hard ticket to get. This is back in the 90s, in the 80s.
Yeah.
The Yankees sold more A's tickets when they were in town than the A's did. That's just a normal thing. That's just how it is.
And that's okay. I mean, you see people here in Vegas talk about how awful it is seeing less than 80% Raider jerseys at Allegiant. We may have talked about this before. I love going to the Bellagio and seeing the fountains. I know that MGM doesn't put fountains in front of the Bellagio if only the Las Vegas locals are going to pay to see them or interact. And no, they need the visitors there to see them and buy stuff and gamble and so forth. Right. I love the visitors because of them I get to see the fountains. Same thing is true with the other sports. So my tolerance is higher for that.
a lot of locals in Vegas get to see a lot of great sports, that are happening on the strip, and they don't have to go. They don't want to go to. How many people do? Yeah, I know you guys go to the strip, but how many Las Vegans are like, I never, haven't been in 10 years, but they
Yeah.
love the Knights, they love the Aces, and they'll go see them at one of the station casinos or whatever their spot is, PTs, all these places,
Yes.
and they have a great time, just like every other community does.
Yeah, for sure. It might be a little bit different, but that's cool. I mean, not every community has reclinable seats at the sports books and waitresses serving you drinks and hot dogs for $1.50, like the South Point does.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
hey,
I just in South Point, pick Durango, whatever it is, right? Durango Sportsbook is crazy. And the other thing, and people again lose sight of this. A lot of those fans that are wearing Eagles jerseys are Las Vegans because there's a lot of folks from a lot of other places in Las Vegas, and they're like, I love the Raiders, but I'm a Eagles fan today because that's where they grew up. That's where the heart is. Nothing wrong with
yeah,
that.
not at all, not at all. But I mean, and I get fans too that are like, oh, this is terrible. Back in the day, the
Yeah,
other whatever. I mean, back in the day, lots of things happened we didn't like. So,
sure.
and
Yeah,
that we
yeah,
did
yeah.
like as well. It's a bit time marches on.
Fantastic episode, man. Anything else you want to cover before we wrap it up?
No, this is great. This is fun.
Yeah, thank you. All right, everybody, happy New Year. And I guess I won't see you tomorrow, but I'll see you the day after. Everybody, I'll see you all later. Happy New Year. I'll say goodbye to you in a second, Mitch. Bye, everybody else.
All right. Cheers.